Good morning, Mike, Managing Directors and Global Partners. Here is your news brief for Wednesday, September 23, 2015. We've been predicting it for years, but now the mainstream media is finally picking up on it. Yesterday, Bloomberg ran a story on the changing role of the U.S. dollar in global finance. The article quotes Kit Jukes, an analyst at Societe Generale, who found that in the last 2 months the dollar has been moving in lockstep with both stocks and bond yields, something that is unusual and could signal a changing role for the dollar in the world's markets. Jukes says, quote, "The dollar's status as a funding currency, or a safe haven currency for that matter, is lost," unquote. We all know that in the past the dollar was seen as a safe haven asset in volatile times, but that didn't happen last month when markets fell worldwide. Jukes says in the current environment, dollar strength is dependent on long-dated U.S. Treasuries and equities rising, but if equities fall, the dollar won't be a place to hide. And on Monday, Henry Hewitt published an article at oilprice.com entitled "The Clock is Ticking on the U.S. Dollar as the World's Reserve Currency." In it, he documents the privilege the U.S. has enjoyed since the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, but especially since the petrodollar was created in 1974. He also describes how the fall of the U.S. empire is eerily similar to that of Rome and of the British Crown. He cites the $18 trillion debt the U.S. has racked up as being one of the dollar's biggest vulnerabilities, as this is the largest debt ever owed in the history of the world. It is so large that it can never be paid back, and so liquidation at the expense of the creditors is the only option. But with so much debt owed to foreign countries, defaulting becomes a tricky proposition. Interestingly, he says that people are familiar with the phrase "Rome wasn't built in a day," but they don't often stop to think that it didn't collapse overnight either. Other empires also fell apart over time, so it is likely that the U.S.'s downward spiral has already begun. He points to China's creation of its own benchmark for oil that will soon shift more influence and power to not only the Chinese government, but also its currency. He attributes the current dollar strength to it being the best-looking leper in the colony, but with China's massive accumulation of gold, that could soon change. Hewitt's article was picked up by Business Insider, so here is another example of a mainstream news outlet acknowledging, albeit in an editorial, that the dollar's days as the world's reserve currency are coming to an end. Next, Reuters is predicting that the 2015 shopping season could be the worst since the Great Recession. That is because the recent stock market correction has spooked consumers, not to mention the fact that real median wages are now back at 1989 levels. This, combined with higher rents, as we reported yesterday, have lowered consumer confidence despite cheaper gas prices. According to consulting firm Alex Partners, retail sales are forecast to increase 2.8 to 3.4% during November and December, compared to a 4.4% jump last year. Christmas sales have averaged 3.9% over the last 5 years. In order to be successful this year, Alex Partners says retailers will need to promote early and often to keep consumers engaged. Our opinion is that that probably won't even be enough, as consumers are already so overburdened with debt and living expenses that discretionary spending will be severely limited. And finally, the collapse of the Brazilian real has made cosmetic surgery for foreigners much more affordable, and this has created a surge in medical tourism for the country. For example, a $500 skin treatment in the U.S. runs only about $25 in Brazil, so even with travel expenses, patients can save currency. While medical procedures in Brazil have always been less expensive, the recent decline in the currency has brought a resurgence to firms that specialize in medical tourism. Before the depreciation, cosmetic vacations saw volumes drop to only 1 or 2 customers a year, but now they are handling 20 a month. According to Bloomberg, the U.S. may lose as much as $447 million in hospital and doctor's fees due to Americans leaving the country for medical services. Apparently, one of the most common procedures is butt augmentation, which can cost half as much as in the U.S. Last year in Brazil, there were 50,789 of them done, more than double the 19,350 done in the U.S. And that's your news brief.